Fantastic. Okay. Nothing like a little bit of technical issues to get you going in the morning, right? So if that's the worst that happens, then it's all good. So just wanted to remind everyone about our anti-harassment and antitrust statement that we do have. This is something that we practice online and face-to-face. So we always ask people to be respectful, be engaged, be honest, and be yourself. Be awkward, right? So if you have any questions or comments, please make sure that you pop that in our Q&A panel that's at the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Would love to hear your comments. And if you have any issues as well, pop that in the comments, and we have our lovely Mike Sutton that is on in the background that will help you with anything that you might need. So just a little bit about the international communities, right? We explore business opportunities and challenges and put a focus on the regions that we serve to look at them as worldwide leaders in innovation. And this is how we try and help individuals as well with webinars like these. So just before we do get started, so please bear with me. You'll have to listen to my voice just for a little bit longer. But just a bit of housekeeping that you do need to log on and connect to the audio. As I mentioned, you can ask Q&A questions in the Q&A panel. And then also this will be recorded, so we'll send that out to you. But we would love to ask you also to tweet about our webinar today. So please use the hashtag CompTIA Benelux or the hashtag CompTIA UKCC. And don't forget our Twitter handle, which is @CompTIA_EMEA. Bit about CompTIA. If you don't know what we do, we are a self-funded, not-for-profit trade association dedicated to advancing the global technology industry. We generate nearly £60 million of revenue annually through certification, and that revenue in turn funds many CompTIA programs and initiatives designed to drive our industry forward. That includes programs that includes programs that benefit us as individuals and our organization. And we also would like to share the certifications that we have with you guys. So as stated, CompTIA is funded by the revenue of our vendor neutral certification, including A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, 3 of the top selling technical certifications in the world. In fact, there are more than 1.7 million individuals holding a CompTIA certification, and CompTIA continues to certify about 250,000 individuals a year. So if you take a look at the array of communities and the industry councils that we have, the Benelux and the UK channel communities sit under our communities, and these communities are open to everyone. So please feel free to join us. We have face-to-face meetings 3 times a year, twice in the region and once at our EMEACon meeting that we normally have in London. And these meetings and events feature excellent speakers, great industry insight, and tremendous networking opportunities, all of which is designed to help and grow your career and your business, collectively driving our industry forward. We address concerns in the region identified by the community, and you can see the power and the importance of getting involved and having a voice as it guides us to help the industry where it matters. And our community leaders are from the industry, sharing their time and their knowledge. So if you are in the region, we've got a meeting on the 6th of February in the Benelux region, so it's going to be in Brussels. So if you're in the region, please do let us know. We'd love to get in contact with you. And then on the 3rd and 4th of March, we do have another meeting. In the UK, it's going to be in Liverpool at the Marriott. So please take a look if that is something that you can come and join us with. So we'd love to see you all there. This is our last picture that we have, just to say that we are a friendly bunch. We'd love to invite you to come along. We have lots of workshops, networking opportunities, and coming together as these communities to form a bigger group and a bigger voice. We'll have a bigger relevance, and we can make a bigger impact in the industry. So we would love to ask you to join us. The community prides itself in getting top quality speakers at all our events, and indeed our webinars are no exception. So I am so delighted to introduce Eric Rockwell and David to our meeting. But before I hand it over to them, I would like to take a few minutes just to introduce them. So Eric Rockwell started from growing a successful award-winning can't speak today, I apologize. Award-winning MSP, Eric now helps other solution providers to become best in class, encompassing ISO and CIS 20, NIST 800 compliance, incident response, infrastructure protection, cybersecurity, business continuity, and disaster recovery. With a strong experience in managed services and managed security, private cloud, and VCIO as a service, Eric is a thought leader pioneering new ideas to improve business efficiency, streamline processes, and drive higher margins. And also we have the lovely Dave Watts, who is the CFO for INSOC. He's the former CEO of NetFusion, a well-established and highly successful MSP based in Los Angeles, and Dave brings a raft of experience and insight as the CFO at INSOC from his 24 years experience in the industry, combining technical management and financial experience. And of course, Dave has started working in the industry when he was only 8 years old. So I would now like to hand it over to Eric and Dave. Take it away, guys.
I started when I was 7, still.
Absolutely.
All right. Mr. Dave, I think you're back on mute, so you'll probably have to come off mute if you want to chat. We're going to be talking today about the CIS 20. This is a subset of the NIST Cyber Security framework, and we're going to go into depth on using this framework to protect your MSP against the most common types of cyber attacks. Unfortunately, this is not the way that things were 10 years ago. Cyber criminals have woken up to the fact that MSPs hold the keys to the kingdom for a whole bunch of other companies. So our whole community is under heavy attack. We see that every day in our security operations center globally. Cyber criminals attacking MSPs all over the place. So the goal today is to talk about what causes real breaches in MSPs and how to prevent them from happening. So right now, the bad guys have gotten organized, and we have not. Cyber criminals are the new face of organized crime, and if you look at the amount of money that's been stolen to date in cybercrime, it is so much larger than any other organized crime or bank robbery in history. I mean, the numbers don't even compare. It's in the hundreds of billions of dollars, and cyber criminals are getting rich. And the more organized they get, the more effective they become. And it's gotten to the point now where one cyber criminal might discover an open port and sell that information to another cyber criminal who realizes that it's an MSP, who puts that on a list of MSPs with open ports, who sells that to another cyber criminal who specializes in breaching MSPs, who hires another cyber criminal to help break in on that specific port. That's how organized that community has gotten. So just to illustrate that, this orange line indicates the number of individual record breaches in the United States going back to the year 2000. And as we can see, last year in 2018, the number hit 2.5 billion. And surprisingly, the numbers are in for the first half of 2019 this year. And just in the first half of 2019, it was 4 billion. So we're on track for 8 billion breaches this year. It's just skyrocketing. We're going to have to get a larger slide for that, Dave. So these are some real numbers, too, from 2018. There was $114 billion in cash that was stolen from cybercrime, like ransomware attacks, people paying the ransom, people hacking into email accounts and tricking people into wiring money to the wrong spot. And what's interesting is that costs an additional $274 billion in lost time that was spent recovering from the breach. So I think with the MSP community, we feel that in spades because we can't bill for the time that we're helping a client get back up and running if they were breached usually. And it's probably a lot more than the average company feels. Would you agree, Dave?
I'd agree. I'd also point out that think about the time lost. If you have clients that are that bill for their time, whether they be CPAs, law firms, et cetera, imagine the amount of time, the opportunity cost if they lose their billable time. That's a lot of money to them. That means a lot of unhappy people. One more thing. Can you go back one? I wanted to point out that just re-emphasize what you were showing on the prior slide. That says there were more than twice the breaches in 2018 than 2017. So that's like a hockey stick type line. I don't think your line there probably even really shows it as much. I mean, look how the slope of that last section of that line, how much higher that is than previously. So it's only getting worse. That's basically the point.
And so this year, imagine if this hits 8 billion. I mean, this line is just going to be shooting straight up to the moon. So there's good news amidst all of this. 85% of these breaches could have been prevented by the top 6 critical security controls. And we're going to be going into detail in a few minutes on what these controls are and how to successfully apply them in an MSP. So we're going to ask some questions that are answered by correctly deploying these security controls. And the first question is, how would you know? Yeah.
Can you briefly, not everybody may know what the CIS-20 is. Can you briefly say what that is so they understand what that is?
Sure. Let me skip ahead to the next couple of slides.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, we'll go backwards. The Center for Internet Security, or CIS, is a nonprofit organization. They're government funded by the U.S. government, and their specific mission is to help companies of all sizes figure out the best cyber defense. And that means if their budget is very small, they have a recommended approach for how to best secure that company, even given the small budget that they have. And that scales all the way up to large enterprises, and it gives them a starting point for securing a huge company, even if they have a long way to go. And it's a big mountain to climb. So every year, the CIS prioritizes security controls from the NIST 800 framework. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. I want to go back to the questions, and these are the questions that every MSP should be asking themselves. And if you can say yes to all of these questions, you have a good starting point. So how would you know if a bad actor logged into your email from a computer in Russia? And Dave, why would they want to care about reading your emails or clients' emails?
They're going to learn, they might learn about usernames and passwords. They might learn about what the particular client is doing. They might learn about patterns like the CEO, if someone's going to be out of the office or someone's going to be gone. And then they can, anything that might give them opportunity to either breach or send targeted spear phishing. There's a lot of reasons.
Yeah, it's pretty scary what sort of things we have hiding in our email. How would you know if somebody phished your PSA or RMM password, or if your actual servers were under attack or already breached? So you need to know if somebody's attacking your RMM servers or PSA and trying to break in. And you need to know that no one has already broken in. We see this all the time, and it's very common when we onboard MSPs in our SOC that we find that their tools are already under attack. And before the attack starts, people do reconnaissance scans. How would you know if somebody's testing to see what they can possibly attack? How would you know if somebody copied your most sensitive data out of your cloud? Now, this is an interesting one. How would you know if a personally owned computer with malware was attacking your network from the inside? Why would we care about that, Dave?
Well, if a computer is on the inside of your network, so let's say someone you said personally owned, right?
Yep.
So let's say somebody comes in and I'm going to work on the weekend, and I bring in, you know what, I really like my MacBook better than my other computer, so I'm going to bring it in, or I really like my whatever computer or device better. I come in, or I want a second computer while I'm working, and I come in. That computer, we don't know what's on it. We don't know how clean it is. We don't know where it's been. We don't know if it has malware on it. If it has any malware on it, now that it's on the inside of the network, most modern-day malware is not to like throw up make your computer slow. In fact, you'll probably never know it's even on there. And it's on there, and it's going to be able to do internal reconnaissance and figure out where the most valuable assets are. Basically, it's like letting a criminal inside your house at night. They can look around, decide what they're going to do, and then plan their attack.
Exactly. Yeah, think about it. Even if you have a client's computer that might be infected and you're trying to just plug it into the network to download updates and clean it, that can actually attack everything in your environment behind your firewall the way that cyber criminals can't attack from the outside. And this might seem trivial. It's not. This is the #1 cause of every breach in the United States going back 7 years. So this is a problem that's not unique to the United States. This is a problem that happens worldwide, and it's the most common cause of bad actors getting in. And that's all it takes is for one of us to bring a computer in and ask what the wireless password is.
Right. And also, I'd say most MSPs and or whomever have probably worked the hardest on perimeter defense, like their firewall, et cetera. And what you're basically bringing someone in, it's like a Trojan horse. You're bringing someone in inside the network, past the perimeter defenses, past the moat and the gate and the walls. Bring them all inside, and then they can operate inside and have a lot more access than they would otherwise.
Exactly. It's like when you go to the airport, no matter if you're trusted or not, even the people that are trusted still have to go through a security checkpoint, and they still have to follow the process. They still have to get scanned. It's not like you can just show up at the airport and know someone who's working there and go through the back door. So how would you know if an old IT person or another MSP still had their tools on your network or still had access? This is a really good question because when we onboard new clients in our stock, we commonly find RMM tools that are checking into the wrong place or going to the wrong company, or we see command and control signals coming from former MSPs or IT people. We find remote control tools that are unauthorized and old IT people that still have access. We even found at an MSP a couple months ago, they actually had a Raspberry Pi that was hidden in their network, plugged into their switch and covered in patch cables that an old employee had installed years ago, and this old employee still had access, remote access to this Raspberry Pi device. And lastly, how would you know if somebody was logged in as you in two places at once? Quite simply, if you're logged in from a computer in London, you cannot possibly log in 5 minutes later from a computer in Russia or China or Los Angeles. And this is a really common sign that someone's password has been compromised or an account's been breached. So this is the NIST cybersecurity framework. This is where we pull these critical security controls from. And everything in the framework starts with identification. If you don't have 100% control over what hardware assets are allowed to be in your environment or connect to your cloud resources and what information is stored on them, if you don't know where your sensitive information is stored, it's hard to know if it's gotten lost or if it's getting scattered about the cloud. And if you don't know what software is allowed to be on those assets, it's really hard and reactive to detect rogue software that shouldn't be there. And part of identification is understanding what the real requirements for the business environment are and what sort of policies govern what people can and can't do. These policies can become very complex and hundreds of pages long in larger companies because they need a lot of governance. It can just be a few pages long in a small company, and it doesn't have to be complex, but what's important either way is that there's a written definition of what is and is not allowed in the technology environment. The policies are so important. And that's how we detect things like unauthorized remote access. If we know that this specific VPN server is the only authorized method of remote access, then anything else with the remote access signature, like TeamViewer or something like that, is unauthorized, and then we know that something wrong is happening, a policy violation. And we commonly find companies, especially MSPs, jumping right to the middle of the framework and deploying detection tools because they're fun and powerful. But how can you possibly have effective detection tools if you don't have 100% control of every piece of hardware, software, information, and user that's in your environment? And how do you have proper detection if you haven't first identified what's allowed or not?
It's actually, Eric, it's actually a lot easier if you know everything that's allowed, then you only have to look for the things that are not allowed versus
Exactly.
the opposite, which is a lot more work and a lot more noise for your team.
Exactly. That's exactly right. By the way, Estelle just messaged me. We're getting questions coming from the audience. Somebody wants to know, if a honeypot was set up in an MSP, would that help catch the adversaries? So we actually have a honeypot set up, and we do not have the honeypot set up in our own environment. We do not want any cyber criminals knowing what sort of IPs we operate from. So that's not something that we practice. Our honeypot is completely isolated, and it's set up in a unique Azure and AWS account. And we have it set up to look like a fake company. And we've got all sorts of fake data on servers all over the world. And we actually watch that and see it get breached every single day. And we learn in real time how cyber criminals expose different things, usually default configurations or insecure ports, stuff that's from the list of critical security controls here, and breach environments. So I would not recommend deploying a honeypot in your own network, but we do use them to learn and actually watch cyber criminals go to work every day. So this is a list of the top 20 critical security controls. We're going to be doing a deep dive into the top 6, which have to do with the inventory and control of hardware and software assets, knowing what vulnerabilities exist in that environment on your hardware and software that's authorized and fixing them proactively, controlling the use of administrative privileges, the keys to the kingdom, and getting alerted on where those accounts are used from, isolating them so they can't be used from remote geographies, isolating them so that they can only be used from specific authorized assets, getting alerted if new privileged accounts are created, and having a secure configuration for everything in your environment, mobile devices, servers, computers. This is a really important security control that we find missing almost 100% of the time. Most MSPs don't have a hardening benchmark for their computers that they provision, but they provision thousands of computers every year for clients, and those could have all been hardened before they went out into service. And properly hardening an asset just turns off all the insecure stuff in Windows that nobody ever uses, and it prevents things like all known variants of ransomware from being able to execute in Windows. It's very powerful. And the last of the top 6 controls is monitoring and analyzing everything that happens in your environment, the audit of logs. So we're going to give some examples of how powerful that can be too.
And Eric, I would add, when we say your environment could consist of your local network. It could be any branch offices. It could be your Office 365. It could be anything you have in Azure or AWS. So environment could be anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah, well said. So I've got some screenshots here demonstrating asset inventory control. So a lot of MSPs have RMM tools that have some asset inventory control capabilities. The whole point of this security control is understanding everything that's actually allowed, to be inside of your environment and your cloud environments and your client environments, and having a way to get alerted if unauthorized or unapproved assets log in successfully. This could be joining your wireless network or your client's network on the inside. It could be logging into Office 365. But this is the most important security control, and there are known ways of controlling these assets. This is critical security control number one, and this is something that you can do in the Microsoft 365 cloud, every one of their products, any network that has LAN connectivity. And I'm just showing an example here of an inventory of authorized assets. It's very important that you have a way to get alerted if any unauthorized assets start popping up in your environment. So the next security control, critical security control 2, has to do with the inventory and control over software. So we mentioned this earlier. What is your authorized remote control program? Right here we can see that a known bad actor is trying to remote desktop into a computer in the United States from Russia. So Dave, let's talk about this a little bit. When you had your MSP, how did you come across unauthorized remote access?
Well, I'd say for probably the first 22 of the 24 years, we didn't. So it wasn't until we started doing this kind of monitoring, this kind of logging of everything, that we were able to actually get eyes on what was happening on the inside. And I'm going to set the context for something. I owned an MSP for 24 years. I will say I was very fortunate to have incredibly bright, hardworking staff. Everybody really cared about the organization, and so I had really good people. And people are still people. So people would want to, I'm going to come in and work on the weekend, or I'm going to, this is really, I'd rather use my team viewer. It's a little bit easier for me to get to than it is for us to use the VPN or whatever your other your authorized remote access method is. People often will do whatever they think they need to do to get the job done expediently, and that's not always the best way, or they're not thinking big picture of what this can do. So I just want to stress that with everyone. You may have the best people. You may think they're all doing things the way that you would do them as a MSP owner. I can assure you from personal experience, people cut corners to make their lives easier or to try to please the client, and then that's where mistakes are made.
Yep. Exactly. Dave, I think that you even won an MSP client years ago because the former MSP opened up a remote desktop port and disabled MFA to make the managing partner of the CPA firm happy while he was on vacation, and they got breached.
Yeah, they got breached, and in fact, it was such a bad breach. This is how sophisticated, if we have 1 minute, I'll tell you how sophisticated these breaches are. So someone had opened up, the client was on a ski trip. He couldn't get in remotely. He asked them to fix it so he could get in. His VPN wasn't working correctly. They opened up an RDP port on the firewall so he could get in without having to go through the VPN, but then they forgot to close it. And then sure enough, they were breached, but they didn't know it. They were in there for quite a while, and then what they did was, this is how that division of labor on the breaches you were talking about happens. They got in and they were actually running, doing tax returns in their tax preparation software every night for people that had not filed, for people who had filed extensions, and so and then getting the refund sent to debit cards. So that's very sophisticated, and this was like on a 15-person CPA firm. So no one's immune from this, and it's literally with someone on the help desk. This, again, not my help desk. This is how we got the client. They were breached beforehand. Important distinction. But someone was trying to please the client because the client was demanding.
Yep. So this is a very powerful security control. That's why you have to know what your authorized method of remote access is and get alerted if somebody remote desktops in from Russia, unless you have somebody working there. We have a question from the crowd. Somebody's asking how we can make sure audit logs cannot be tampered with. The audit logs have to leave whatever device they're coming from and go to a third-party log management system. That's called a security information event management system. And you can't just use any random free log tool. It has to be something that's certified. Do you want to talk about that, Dave? The power of a security event management system instead of a free log tool?
Sure. Well, if you have a free log tool, you may or may not get all the information. A free log tool is going to basically gather logs and just store them, and then someone still is going to have to look at them. Logs are generated, every single device on your network generates probably hundreds of logs, or hundreds of events per minute. And then imagine that times 60 for an hour, times 24/7, and that's times every device in your network. So no human being that I know of can read through that stuff, even if they sat there, were dedicated, read through that stuff and make sense of it. Plus, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing with that kind of system. So what you want is you want a system that's going to be able to say, oh, wow, this is interesting. I'm getting right now someone's trying to log in. Someone's trying to knock on this port on the firewall, and maybe that is benign in and of itself. But if at the same time we're getting someone logging in from the same IP address over into our email, suddenly now those two pieces of information now are going to be put together and escalated. So it's an algorithm.
Exactly.
So you want something that's going to be analyzing those logs and applying artificial intelligence to them to be able to actually get the bigger picture.
Exactly. And if you have a free log gathering tool like that, you may not be able to demonstrate and prove that the logs haven't been tampered with, like we said earlier. So you have to have a system that's capable of ingesting these logs and correlate events together. And that system has to be able to stand up in court and prove that the logs were not tampered with. The system itself, yeah.
I'm sorry, I was going to underscore what you said. That is, most states, we live in California, but most states in the United States and probably worldwide, it's just as important now to know what was breached, or what, the flip side really, what wasn't breached as what was breached. Because if you can show with the right, security incident and event management tool, if you can prove that only this part was breached instead of the whole thing, then you have a much lower amount of information you have to report on or meet, reporting requirements for whatever your local government is.
Yep, exactly. We have one more question from the group, and then we'll move on. So if people are the weakest link in any company or MSP, what would be recommended measures to increase awareness of security amongst people? So security awareness and policy training is actually control number 17. It's very important, but Dave, how can you train somebody on what your policy is if you don't actually have it written down first? It's very difficult to do, tribal training. So that's one of the most common mistakes that we see also, people just kind of verbally dictating what's right and wrong without having a more formal program around it.
Right, and a lot of times you hear people talk about security awareness training. In actuality, a lot of people, that's just phishing training for a lot of companies. And that's not right. Enough. That's important, but it's one very small piece of it.
Exactly. Well said. Everybody has to know where these breaches are coming from and why things are and are not allowed. Let's see. One more part of that question. Yeah, people head towards what's easier for them. That just underscores what we said. People have to know what's right and wrong, what's not allowed and what's dangerous. All right. So this is a interesting picture. This was an MSP that we onboarded a few months ago, and they had port 80 open on their LabTech server, and we could see that they were getting machine gun attacked by a known cyber criminal in South Korea with a DDoS reputation 1.5 million times a day. Pretty scary. These things are actually surprisingly easy to break into. And one thing that I wanted to point out also, part of this security control, MFA is definitely important, but it's also not enough. So aside from having MFA, you want to have some sort of policy around where logins can actually happen from. And if you don't have anybody working in India or China, then you shouldn't be able to log in from there. Or if you only work from India, you shouldn't be able to log in from the US. One thing on that also, one big risk and cause of breaches that we see has to do with legacy authentication in Office 365, which is turned on by default. What is legacy authentication, Dave? What does that mean?
Legacy authentication is when you have, and by the way, people, I would just want to say something that's funny because people always think, oh, I've got my email in Office 365, it's safe and secure, right? Absolutely not when you first turn it on as the defaults. In fact, they actually give you a way to score it, and it's unbelievably low if you just do the defaults. Why is that? They set it up so that it's easy to get going, and then it's up to you to know what to do to go in and harden that. But legacy authentication is saying, okay, so I'm going to allow, I believe it's Outlook 2010, correct me if I'm wrong, and
yep.
older or other email clients. Maybe I've got someone that, someone loves, I don't know if they're old enough to remember Eudora email client or some funky email client from the past. And so by default, legacy access is turned on, which means you can use those older email clients. Well, why is that bad? Those older email clients were not designed to work with multi-factor authentication. So if you allow legacy access, you're allowing devices that can bypass multi-factor authentication. So you could actually say, I want MFA turned on for all my users, but it would still be disabled for anyone coming in with a legacy application. Sorry, legacy email client.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so legacy authentication is very bad. It's something that most people don't have control over. And nobody needs to log into your email these days with a POP or IMAP account. And a lot of those legacy applications can bypass MFA, even if you're enforcing MFA. Very dangerous. Part of Critical Security Control 4 is also not using default usernames. This is something that we see all the time. ConnectWise has an account called zAdmin. Every cyber criminal knows that. Windows has an account called administrator. Every cyber criminal knows that. Anything running Linux like VMware has a default account called root. Every cyber criminal knows that. Admin on firewalls. We see this all the time. And a lot of these breaches, this is, again, part of the number 4 cause of every breach in the US going back the last 2 years, has to do with the default username like administrator that's in use and was breached. And probably every time we onboard an MSP, Dave, we see the use of this default administrator account flying around the network.
Now, you've given them 50% of the authentication right off the bat.
Exactly. And it usually doesn't require multi-factor authentication, which it should. And there's no restriction on where the accounts, the admin accounts, can be used from. And if you don't have anybody working remotely from Russia, they shouldn't work from Russia. So this is something interesting too. You want to know if there's any traffic leaving your network that's going to a known cyber criminal. You also want to know if there's any traffic that's transversing your firewall coming into your network from a known cyber criminal. Dave, what business reason would your old MSP have to have traffic going to a known cyber criminal?
0. Be no reason.
It doesn't exist. Exactly. So this is something that we see all the time. These are people that are either trying to break in or have malware that's sending a command and control signal out. So this is a really good indication that something's wrong. And this is something that every MSP should be detecting, and it should be 100% clean at all times. By the way, think about when you onboard a new account. Yeah.
I wanted to stress something that you said, and that is, it is just as important to know someone's trying to break in as it is if, as if they've actually broken in, or it's almost as important. Because if someone is trying to break in, that's where, if you don't know about that, you're not going to know your potential weaknesses and what you need to go back and harden or change. So I think that's really important. A lot of times everyone focuses on if someone got in, and a lot of endpoint protection, a lot of IDS on firewalls, et cetera. They may be stopping some things from happening, but you're not really learning from what's happening or how they're preventing it. You want to learn from that so that you can prevent it, because at some point it won't be able to prevent it.
Exactly. Yep, well said. One thing that I wanted to mention also, think about when you onboard a client. Dave, how many times when you had your MSP did you onboard a client that was completely perfect and 100% clean?
It'd be a big zero. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be switching.
So every time you onboard a client, think about the potential risk that you're inheriting. Look at this slide. Look at this potential infested ball of junk that you're now accountable for. This is such a huge risk. And, this company might be paying you a couple $1,000s a month, and you're inheriting tens of thousands of dollars in risk. I mean, it's just not worth it. By the way, the first thing that we're taught in cybersecurity school is how to measure the value of a company's assets, and that helps us understand how much money we should potentially spend protecting them. So you don't want to, run out there and buy a $100 watch and then go buy a $10,000 safe to make sure that nobody steals the watch. That would be, silly. So, right? So same thing goes for your network. If your clients, if they can prove to you that their information is not valuable and there are no regulations that require the security of that information, and that cyber criminals can't monetize that in some way, have them prove that to you. You'll find that 99.99% of the time, if they're paying for a managed service provider to help with their IT, they have valuable information, and it's highly sensitive, and most of these breaches would cost at least $50,000 US, and that's at a minimum. And usually we see that it's actually more than 2x that. So if you're trying to prevent a $100,000 risk from happening that might happen once a year, it's probably worth spending 10 or 20 or maybe even 50 grand preventing that from happening. And that's the decision that you have to help your clients make. We've got another question from the crowd. Is the SOC 2 attestation for the MSP not adequate of compliance? So this is something that we're heavily involved in. Dave and I do a lot, we have a lot of auditing experience in our backgrounds. So the SOC 2 is going to prove that at a moment in time, somebody came in and audited some of your security controls, and that's for an actual certification. If you're just attesting, then you're only getting partway there for one moment in time. There are additional types of certifications that go much deeper, but again, those are just annual audits. And a SOC 2 can prove that you're complying with something, so that can map back to a framework like the one that we're looking at, or regulations. One thing that we commonly see also is that most MSPs don't have any sort of certifications or way to demonstrate that they are keeping their clients' information safe. And we see that as a huge opportunity. By the way, this is kind of a good segue. These are implementation groups, predefined right ways of implementing the security controls in order as defined by the Center for Internet Security. So the group size to companies And these are things that you can actually get certified on. You can get certified that you have properly implemented all of the controls in implementation group 1, 2, or 3. And this maps back to a security maturity level. And this is a really, really good way to demonstrate that you have some way of keeping your clients' information safe. Or you're keeping their information safe by helping them become certified. So Dave, what sort of objections do we hear about, why should we have any security?
I've never spent it before. Why should I have to spend it now? It's one you hear all the time. Also, the one I love is, well, everything's working fine, so we haven't been breached. Whatever we're doing is enough.
It's so funny. It's like, I can do stuff that's dangerous because I haven't died yet. That makes a lot of sense. Well, and it's funny, but if you think about it, it's almost like driving home drunk every night. Sure, you might be able to drive home from the bar drunk and get home safely, but if you don't, that one time, the consequences are really, really, really bad, and they're varying degrees of really bad.
Yeah, I've heard another one is, well, we have cyber insurance. So that's enough, right? What I always tell people is like, you know what? I have auto, almost beat the driving analogy to death. I have auto insurance, but yet I still wear my seatbelt and I still try to drive safely.
Yeah, you don't want to be using your insurance. Hello?
Yeah.
So right now, I know that we've got a couple of minutes left and then we need to go to questions, but one of the things that we've seen is MSPs creating brand new managed security packages similar to MSP packages and going out there and offering these sort of outcomes at a monthly fee. This is a very cool new MRR model. Estelle, I know we're chomping at the bit for questions here. Back to you.
You're doing a really great job because you're going through all the list of questions. I think we've got one that's come in as well from Cedric that's asked the question about is the SOC 2 for MSPs not adequate assurance for compliance?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to comply with, and I tried to address that earlier. But you want more than just an attestation. You want to have some sort of a certification eventually when you're ready that proves that these controls are required by policy, that they're actually operating and automated, not just in place at one moment in time, and that the business is measuring them on a regular basis. And this is the new future. This is what people are going to be asking for, and it's coming now.
Fantastic. I've got a couple of more questions to go through, Eric. Would you like me to jump into those right now?
Well, yes, please. I think we only have 10 minutes left.
Okay, so I'm going to say hello to everyone. We've got a couple of questions over here, so I've switched my video on so you guys can see. We'll have a bit of a Q&A discussion over here. But this one goes out to Eric and Dave. You guys are really great at complementing each other with your answers. So questions come through. Security audits are becoming a more commonly used tool for MSPs in order to know where to start when protecting their clients. How would you go about conducting one on your MSP business?
Man, that is a really great question. I even have a slide about that. Give whoever that was a free certification.
I'll quote you on that. Thanks.
So there's a really, really good way to measure this. It's called the security maturity level. This is widely used and recognized in the United States. You can self-assess against the CIS 20, and there's a whole process for that. It's about 200 questions. It's the exact same thing that we do on real SOC for cybersecurity audits. And that's going to give you a 0 to 5 score that tells you how mature your security posture is. Guess what the typical score is, Estelle?
That is not impressive at all.
No, but it makes sense, and it relates to that slide that we showed of all the breaches hockey sticking skyward.
One of the things I wanted to point out is, and for that question is, one, that whoever asked is very smart to recognize that they should be doing this on themselves first, on their own MSP. But if they go through this process that Eric just talked about and did that security maturity level assessment, figure out exactly where they are, and then looked at actually what was necessary to remediate that and get that score up to, I mean, for an MSP, you should be at least a 3.0, I would think. Would you agree with that, Eric? Okay.
Yeah,
so,
100%.
At least a 3.0 minimum. So do that assessment on yourself first. Learning that will then teach you what you could go out and sell that you could do for your clients. But I would definitely do it on yourself first.
That's great. And thanks, Dave, for putting a benchmark in, right? So people understand what they should be aspiring to, so that they understand, you know, what the gap is and where they should be heading. So that's great. Another question that has come through is that another typical solution to tackling cybersecurity threats cited by many MSPs is MSP employee training to ensure that staff understand the level of threat. And this is something that you had spoken about, you know, a lot, Eric and Dave. So what training and processes would you recommend to have implemented?
There's an entire...
I'd like to... Yeah. Go ahead. You go ahead. Do you want to go?
No, please, take that.
Okay, so having owned an MSP for 24 years, again, great staff, super smart people, everyone really trying to do the right thing. It is probably impossible to train on every possible thing that would need to be trained on. What I would do is I would take them through, have everyone participate in this security maturity level assessment, and recognize what are all the things that should be done. It's very, very eye-opening. And regardless of what training you do, you could train on everything. And you still, I'm a big believer in trust but verify. You still need to be able to verify, okay? People are still people. They're going to forget things. It's out of sight, out of mind. So you have to have systems in place to verify that what you've trained on is being adhered to.
Yep, well said. And start with the policies. It's really, really, really difficult to deliver effective training unless you relate it back to right and wrong in your company. And once people start understanding the policies, they can make their own decisions and realize why they shouldn't do something and why they shouldn't be plugging client machines into your private network and vice versa. It starts to make sense.
It sounds simple, right? we could maybe ask everyone on the... Go on.
Oh, no, sorry, Estelle.
I was just going to say we could ask everyone on the call to assess, to take a look at where they are right now and apply those simple changes that you've suggested, and maybe come back to us in a couple of months' time to see how that's actually changed their internal workings, right? So.
Oh,
exactly right. Yeah, I was going to mention also, look at how far down toward the bottom security awareness and training is. There's so many things that you have to put in place, so many layers that go in place before you actually start doing training. You don't want to have to implement some controls, do training, and then go make a whole bunch of changes, because then you're going to have to do training again. So there's just a lot that has to go into the environment before the training is truly effective.
That makes so much sense.
I think a lot of MSPs love to, and I've been guilty of this myself in the past. You want to hop right to some tools, and then you're going to train on the tools. But that's kind of like, ready, fire, aim. We want to stop instead, aim, think about what we're going to do, and then put a plan in place to achieve that, and then you can train on adhering to that.
Exactly. I mean, in your analogy, Dave, that's like going to war and you don't know what you're shooting at. You're probably not going to get too far if you don't know what the target is.
You guys are really giving
And
people all the tools for being more efficient, right, and effective. And this is about not just, you're securing yourself, but you're streamlining. You've got your return on investment for this is going to be exponential if you are doing it in the right way, and you're not wasting money on things that you have to put in place and then redo every couple of months because of, like you said, Dave, you have to implement new things because of the new tools that you're doing.
Yeah, and just to emphasize that, what you just said, Estelle, secure yourself, learn this stuff for yourself first. Do your information security policies, do the top 20 critical controls, figure out your security maturity level for your own firm, and then do the remediation. By going through that process, you can then go out and do the same thing for your clients. There's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of MRR, and there's also NRR for remediation work. So there's a lot of opportunity. A lot of people look at this and like, oh my gosh, it's just one more thing I have to do. Look at it as a learning opportunity for how you can go and do this for your clients and make a lot of money.
Yeah, by the way, this is not going to be an opportunity forever. It is faster and faster becoming an expectation, and eventually it's going to be hard to keep business, let alone win new business, if you don't have a good security posture.
And one thing, if there's time, one more comment on that. If you don't go out and talk about cybersecurity with your clients first, educate them on here's what IT does, here's what these additional cybersecurity is not included in your existing service, and here's what if we want to get to a better security posture, here's what we're going to have to do. If you don't go out and do that, someone else is going to come in behind you and take away your business. So you might as well have the conversation. Let them choose. If they don't want to spend money on it, that's okay. At least they'll know that you do these things.
Yep. Estelle, I saw that we had another question. It's from a UG student who's incredibly interested in security, and they're looking for some advice on what they can do to, I think, become a security professional someday. And I believe they also wanted to thank you, Ms. Estelle, for your kindness. You want to take the kindness one first?
Yeah, no, I'm always happy to welcome everyone. But with regards to certification for security, I would love to connect with anyone offline if you would like some more information about how you can get involved with our certification, and we can connect you with the right people.
Yeah, and in terms of career path, get in somewhere, and while you're going to school, see if you can get a part-time job in a SOC or something in the security field. You will learn way more through whatever part-time job that you have than you will probably any other way. And once you actually have credentials, you graduate, you get certified, it's going to be so much easier to get a better job if you already have that experience on your resume.
Absolutely. I do want to jump in on that, Eric, because CompTIA advocates apprenticeship through all the regions that we have. And then that's exactly to your point, where learning on the job, technology changes so quickly, the landscape and the environment is so fluid that when you actually are done probably studying at university, when you get into the workspace, it's not what you're learning at university. So we are advocating for people to learn on the job, get some certs while you're doing that. And then when you do get and apply for that job, you have that experience behind you. You have also the theory, and you'll be well positioned to have a really great job in the industry. So, great. And we've reached the top of the hour. So just wanted to give a big shout out to, everyone that's on the call. Thank you so much. So this is me extending that kindness, right? We really appreciate you spending this time with us. We hope that you learned a lot. I sure did. Kind of scary stuff. But a massive shout out to Eric and Dave. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your knowledge with us. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to give you just a few seconds, just like put you on the spot. What's the one thing, just a key takeaway that you want to share with the group? Go for it, Eric.
Do not assume that anything is happening. Get evidence and get proof that it is or is not happening, and do that on a regular basis.
Love it. Dave, over to you.
secure yourself first, and then secure your clients. And don't assume something. You need to choose a framework that you're going to measure yourself against. You know what? If you play a game and you don't have any way to score yourself, you really don't know if you've accomplished anything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. We've reached the top of the hour, 1 minute over, but just again, thank you everyone for coming along to the webinar. The webinar is now over, so we'll follow up with you by email, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, Estelle.
Bye.